I really want to build a dragon deck, so I made Mirren.
I think every Commander player should have at least one dragon-led deck. Not necessarily a dragon
deck, but there are so many cool legendary dragons that you can do stuff with. Yeah, I agree.
Not to gatekeep non-dragon.
That's why I think like Gazaleth is quite a cool commander. Because I'm like, it's not doing dragony things; it's doing artifacts and instants and sorceries, which normally dragons don't do.
Also, another pivot to dragons doing treasury things seems quite on flavour, right?
Well, exactly. This is why Corvold, such a...
Or Zeratora,
sure, I guess. I feel like treasure is the wrong thing. I feel like that should have had gold. It should have been like bribe. It should have felt more like money.
Gold was a token, wasn't it?
Yeah, but it was because you didn't have to tap to sacrifice it. You could improvise and then sacrifice it. So it kind of had too much utility. And now have a second food chain. Isn't that exciting?
No.
Should we start?
Welcome to Magic the Flavouring, the Magic the Gathering podcast, where we talk about all things Magic flavour design and lore. I'm your host, Andy Mann.
Hello! This is Nathan Cancel.
They never know what I'm laughing at.
It's always me. Always me and my hilarious jokes.
Unfortunately, that's true. Lost Caverns of Ixalan time.
We're back.
They dropped all 7 stories.
Yes.
In one go.
So is this yet another... So another set has come with another format of storytelling. Not just in the amount that they give us, but in how they give it to us.
Yeah, so obviously it was like they'd maybe do 1 or maybe 1 or 2 every couple of weeks.
Mm-hmm.
5 side stories, 5 main stories, which is what we liked, and yet again they've twisted it around.
And then they went to like 1 a day for the week, and I'm like, that's quite good, because every day you can wake up, have your coffee, and read your little magic story.
Yeah.
This one... And as much as there's exasperation in my mouth, in my words, in my tone. Ooh, gross. As much as there's exasperation in my tone, I do feel like it's slightly more justified with this. We'll talk about that in a second. But it is just all of them, off you go on Monday. And then also to really to put the final nail in the coffin, don't get it in audiobook form either this time.
I'm a bad reader. I spoke about this last time when they did the... They weren't perfect, but they were fun, and they were needed, the audio versions of the stories for Wilds of Eldraine. And immediately they've not done it for this one. Like, I don't...
There are two
how much time could it possibly have taken?
There are two ways this goes, right? Is either they heard the lukewarm reception, and they actually paid enough attention, which, considering how recently it was, I doubt it, because I don't think they've had time to...
They would have just done it. They would have done it already.
Or... they realised it was an expense that they didn't want to do, or because they brushed it all out in one go, maybe scheduling didn't allow for them to get someone.
But the people they got to do it are the 2 hosts of the Magic the Gathering Story podcast, which is a Wizards of the Coast funded thing. Those people are already on their payroll.
Maybe they've cut the funding.
Christ alive!
Maybe the interns needed actually to be paid, and they were like, nah.
Like, fucking... voice of all, like, both those casts, us to a degree, although our story reviews, I've tried to do sort of, I haven't really been doing, like, big story blurbs like I used to. Remember when it was, like, fucking 15 minutes of me going through each beat of the story?
Yeah.
Too much.
Well, we're looking at it now, it's like, we're not, if you haven't read it, don't expect to get everything. You're not going to get everything from this.
But, like, there were loads of people who were doing it for free. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, they could just do it. It doesn't take any time.
Just put it also through the automated voice thing. You can just put the entire story into that and it will speak it out again.
I think that would be better than nothing, and I have toyed with the idea of putting it into
like it's genuinely better than nothing to have an automated AI thing speak to you than not. I don't know. Well,
anyway,
point being, I think that the real reason why they did not the real reason, but whatever the reason, the benefit of them doing all of the stories in one go is that this is structured slightly differently than your average Magic the Gathering story. They have done this before, and I think in specifically Midnight Vow, I remember. They did multiple point of view storytelling. And I don't mean like you have like a chapter or like almost like 3/4 of a chapter of one person and you switch up to someone else just to give a little bit of like, no, this chops and changes from almost, I think it's 4 parties?
Yeah, we'll do a little bit of a story breakdown in a second. But yeah,
but it bounces between these voices, and I think what really helps that is that each voice kind of leaves on its own mini cliffhanger before you go to the next person to keep your interest in each of the different journeys. But then at the end of each chapter, obviously there's a kind of a cliffhanger to the end of that bit. But you might want to be like, whoa, now I really want to know what's going on, because this has been left, like, this person, all 4 of their stories have all been left open. So I actually kind of really want to read the next story now, because even if I don't care about 2 of them, the other 2 are so important, I kind of want to know what's going to happen right now. So it does play to that benefit. Like, you could, realistically, with these stories, stop at any point after any particular character's point of view, and you don't lose anything for pacing. So it almost kind of would have made sense to just release it as one long story, and you just kind of choose as you want as to where the chapters end and don't end.
Yeah,
because I couldn't tell you now, because I read these a week ago when they first came out. I couldn't tell you now distinctly exactly where each chapter finished, because I read like 4 of them back to back.
I read them in 2 big chunks, yeah.
And it wasn't anything, I think, too distinctive at the end of each episode, shall we call them, or chapters, to make it feel like this is the ending point. It's almost like, well, we have to break this up into 6 different stories for some reason, even though you dropped them all on one day.
Yeah, I don't know. So let's talk about stories. So we have 6 main stories and 1 side story. We're going to talk about the main stories today. We have Valerie Valdez as the author of this one. She's only done these magic stories in terms of being a magic author. So she's done episode 1 to 6 of the main stories. So new writer. I liked it. I liked her writing style a lot, actually. I didn't think it was too stylized. I didn't think the voices sounded too sort of colloquial either, which is a big sort of red flag for me. And each individual character, we'll get into like this. There are a lot of characters.
This is a proper, like, if you could do this as a like a play and still have like 12 different actors doing all the different parts.
It's mad. The ensemble is huge, and I think she makes all of them seem pretty individual. Which is cool. Which is a good way to do it. And also, we're dealing with a new era of magic where, we might have 1 or 2 characters that are sort of familiar to us, but we're well past the Gatewatch days of having the same central 5 characters been around everywhere.
Yeah, thank God.
So these are all essentially new characters, with sort of maybe things like Huatley and Quintorius and Kellen now to a certain degree being slightly familiar voices, but their characterization is still yet to be sort of fully fleshed out, right?
Yeah, we still don't know enough about them because we didn't get... Well, again, because stories were mostly focused on the Gatewatch when they were on the plains. We didn't actually get a lot of Huatley's point of view. We didn't get... I mean, I guess we got a full book, a full story of Kellen. But Quintorius, for example, only got his one side story, like there's not a lot of his voice, and then you got a little bit of his characterization in the after March of the Machines story.
I reread that side story. I didn't care for it.
It didn't leave a lasting impression. I really like Quint as a character.
Everyone seems to like Quint as a character,
but at the same time, I like him because of what I think his journey is going to be, rather than who he is on that journey. I don't necessarily like his character, but I like what his character is probably going to end up doing. That's more interesting to me.
So, on the surface, this story seems...
on the surface.
That wasn't a pun. Meant to be a pun. This story seems very similar to the last time we were in Ixalan. So, in Ixalan and Explorers of Ixalan, what was the second set? Oh my god, it wasn't Explorers of Ixalan, was it? That was the board game.
It was the board game.
Rivals.
Hey!
Yeah, well done. The story of that one was essentially you had the main 4 factions which they introduced on this new plane. You had the Spanish Conquistador-inspired vampires, which were
the Legion of Dusk.
Legion of Dusk, which was a religious fanatical group. You had the Sun Empire, which were the human dinosaur guild. I was going to say they're not guild.
They're not human dinosaurs, by the way.
No, human/dinosaurs, which were based on the Mesoamerican and Central American sort of cultures. You had the River Heralds, again based on similar sort of cultures, but these were the merfolk.
More jade rather than gold.
Yeah, exactly. And you had the Brazen Coalition, which were pirates. And they were of all different creature types and you had like orcs and humans and sirens and the goblins of the plane.
God, I forget there's the Direfleet Ravager, right? He's the orc wizard.
Well, they mentioned, so I had that exact same. There's one singular sentence in all these 6 stories about the orcs of the West Coast. And I was like, oh, fuck yeah, there are orcs on this plane.
Orcs of the West Coast, that's just a different name for wizards in a different universe, isn't it?
Well, there's one of the board game shops in London is called the Orcs Nest. So
oh, nice.
Yeah.
I like that.
Full circle, I guess. And it was about their factions trying to reach to the Golden City of Erazka for each of the different factions to claim this MacGuffin for themselves. And the structure of this story seems quite similar. You have different factions racing to their end goals in a race against time and each other. But actually, when you dive into it, it is very different.
Well, yeah, none of their individual goals are not aligned per se, even if they all lead them to the same destination eventually. We'll get to it, but like, you know, they all come to the same bottleneck, but they all get to that bottleneck for different reasons and through different means, and they're actually quite varied in what their intentions are. For example, it's not just loads of people fast get to this golden city, take the what's it called? What was it called? The sun.
Chimil.
No, the immortal sun. There we go.
The immortal sun.
There we go, yeah.
There's a lot of sun imagery in Ixalan.
Exactly. Well, because that's weirdly enough, there's three of them. The three aspects on top of everything else. But yeah, so it didn't feel like it was as... Each story almost has more nuance because the intentions are different. You know, there's some of them are more trepidation, some are more in reverence, some are more in fear, rather than it all just being a matter of earnest, of desperation. You know, wacky races almost. It's a little bit less than that. I do think it does feel a little bit disingenuous that all of these things are kind of happening at the same time when when they don't have a very similar goal. But obviously, for the sake of storytelling, that kind of needs to happen. Otherwise, it would be disjointed.
So the way it works is for this one is that we have on the Sun Empire faction, we've got Huatli, their cousin Intil. We have Waita. Is that their name? And Quintorius Can, who was Quintorius Cand, is that his name?
Quintorius Cand,
yes. From Strixhaven, who is a newly bestowed planeswalker. They are on the hunt for the golden door, behind which they believe is the power of the Three Suns, which the Emperor of the Sun Empire wants to try and strike back whilst the iron's hot against the vampires in their homeland of Torozon. This entire story takes place after what they call, was it the war of...
The Invasion War, isn't it?
Or is it the War of Night?
Wasn't the War of Night what happened previously when the Sun Empire lost to a So I think they call it just the invasion.
The invasion. So this is all post invasion. We get told during the invasion, and indeed we see a little bit of it in the actual Ixalan. March the Machine story. God, just trawling about there. It's actually, I mean, God, we're blessed with so much story. Like, it's a good sign that we.
Yeah, it's really chunky. There's a lot that's happened.
There's a lot that's happened. All the different factions of Ixalan clubbed together against the Phyrexians, like they did on most planes, but now they're kind of off and doing their own thing. So the Emperor of the Sun Empire wants to march on Torozon, the homeland of the vampires, the same way that the vampires marched on Ixalan. And he wants the power that is behind this mythical golden door to do so. Quintorius is there because he's basically on an excavation expedition and being like a Lawhold student. This is right up his alley. And he's working with Huatli. Sahili's also around because Huatli and Sahili are just fully fledged in a relationship, which is wonderful.
They're not showing away from it, which is nice.
Yeah, exactly.
Neither of them are decidedly
neither of them are decidedly planeswalkers either.
No, yeah,
which is interesting. And so that's what they're about. Then we have Vito, who was just on a card. Vito was actually never in the previous stories. He was just a card that was... It wasn't even an Ixalan card,
as far as I'm aware, he was back over in Torozon, and you see that even the card we get of him is him back in the church.
Yeah. Isn't it like M21 or something?
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
Yeah, well, obviously he's a very infamous commander card. And I think that infamy of being that infamous commander card makes him now the focus. So Vito is there with a Legion of Dusk consisting of himself, Bartolome, who is a scion or a what do you call it? Denizen. I've sent someone from my court.
Oh, an ambassador, I guess.
Thank you. Yeah, we'll say ambassador of Queen Meralda, who is the queen of Torozon and the vampire race, and the sort of de facto head of the church. We have Amalia, who's a new character who will become very important to Magic Story moving forward, who is a cartogramancer.
Yeah.
Which is map magic.
Map magic. That's
you can just make up anything these days.
I'm a saucepan mage. They call me I'm a tinkermancer.
You're a panamancer.
Yeah, panamancer.
Oh, that's interesting. And there's also another character, Carveliano. There are so many names in this one. Anyway, you have a Legion of the Dust Vampires. Now, Vito is on a mission of his own, so he has found a tome that is from... I was going
to say Talion, but Talion is
Tarion.
Yeah, Tarion, not Talion, which was in the last set, which is a bit annoying, considering they're completely different creatures and different species.
Essentially, Vito, much like real-world religions, is not happy with the way that his religion is religioning, and the way that Elenda, the saint of his religion, and indeed Meralda, his his queen have both teamed up to go, vampires need to stop being dicks all the time, essentially.
And he's like, but why?
Yeah, I want to be a dick, thank you very much.
Let me go and find our bat god so we can continue being even bigger dicks.
He believes that Saint Elender is a false prophet of the vampire religion, as is Queen Merelda, and so he's trying to find Aclazots. I keep saying Alcazots, it's Aclazots, the bat god, who we heard a lot about in the last set, because people thought Saint Elender was going to be that bat god.
Or at least she was there maybe in the tomb that he was in, and maybe when she's released, he's also released, kind of thing.
So Vito is on a crusade to try and find this bat god and prove the true religion of the vampires and Legion of Dusk to bring back to his homeland, which will then subjugate everyone, do vampire things like cause an eternal night, drink everyone's blood, that kind of thing.
And to his favour, we know for sure that what's the girl called?
Amalia.
Amalia, not Amelia. Yeah, Amalia.
Amelia was in the last expansive.
So she can hear a voice, like another worldly voice in her head saying, "Come to me," and it gets increasingly powerful and strong as she gets closer or gets further on her journey. And there's something to be said. I think that Vito probably hears the same thing. So his quest isn't necessarily an empty aspiration. Like it does have some gusto behind it. It's not blind faith, even if it is fanaticism.
Yeah. So those are two factions there. Third faction coming in. Representing the Brazen Coalition, we have Malcolm and Breeches, who were the fan favourites from Vraska's ship, the Belligerent. So Malcolm was her first mate, and Breeches was just, Breeches, being a goblin. Siren and Goblin combo, classic blue and red. They are part now of a larger Brazen Coalition under Captain Vance, of Vance's blasting cannons. And we did eventually get a Vance card, didn't we?
Yeah. Captain Ripley Vance. Yeah.
Yes, and we also got Captain Lannery Storm as well, who's getting another card in this set, but I don't know if Vance is getting a card, I haven't seen one. Anyway, the pirates have kind of pivoted away slightly from plundering the high seas, because there's lots of political infighting between the different ships and coalitions of the Brazen Coalition.
Yeah, they're not so much a coalition anymore.
No, all the different captains are trying to sort of build their own armadas in classic piratey fashion. So some of the pirates have pivoted off into mining, because they've discovered that some of the deeper caverns in Ixalan have gemstones. So they are now working their way down into there's a town called Downtown. I love it. High and dry downtown.
No, I just love the fact that it's a town that's built on a mine, and what do mines do? They go down, and it's a town on top of it. So it's downtown.
Yeah. They have been sent by Captain Vance to explore this downtown, because they haven't had any word from this mining city for quite some time, which, being a massive source of their income, is a bit concerning.
Touch concerning. So
they go down there and find that a strange mushroom-like presence is there. We're not going too far into the story just yet. We then have the River Heralds pop up halfway through the story. They don't really get their own agency, but they are also in the caverns, and they sort of hook up with all the different factions at a certain point to bring them all together. They're all going towards these different MacGuffins, but they are actually all heading towards the same literal place. What they discover after going through these different caverns and fighting giant insects, going through sand dunes that are miles underground.
It's Indiana Jones and the Temple.
Yeah. Discovering a whole new race of Leonin called the Malakan, or is it the Malakan?
I believe it's the Malakan.
Malakan, who are a race of cat folk, jaguar folk, which is pretty cool, which is, very much in line with that part of the world and their sort of flora and fauna. Underworld goblins as well. So you have the sort of goblins that we know of Ixalan, which are the sort of monkey-looking folk. But then there are some pale, pudgy...
these are more like orky kind of
goblins that are beneath the surface. So we've got them, they're a new race. The River Heralds are down there, and basically all these different factions are heading towards a complete underground world. So now this is more like Journey to the Centre of the Earth or something similar like that. They're going full into all these kind of, 50s through to 80s, it's hidden beneath the earth kind of, things, Lost World type aspects. And what they find are the precursors to both the Sun Empire and, to a certain degree, the vampires of the Legion of the Dusk. They find an entire civilization inside a Dyson sphere, which is obviously, it's the core, literally, of the plane. Now, bringing back into it, they can't always escape the idea that planes are pretty much planets. If it's the core of the plane, It's a spherical thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, okay, well,
I mean, at this point, yeah, you've got to... I think that just justifies that that's what Ixalan is.
Yes.
You know, it's an inside-outside plane.
Yes. And so the Golden Door, which the Sun Empire were looking for, the entrance to the Temple of Aklazot, which the Legion of the Dusk was looking for, and indeed the power of the gemstones that the pirates were mining for, all coalesce into this one civilization, which again is the sort of precursors to the Sun Empire. Within this underground world, there are different gods that are basically the gods of Ixalan, and one of them, they do find, is the bat demon god, Aklazots.
I don't believe that Aklazots was actually one of the 5 original gods.
Oh, is that a theory, or is that something you think is in the story?
Well, there is the ancient one, which we'll get when we get to our Flavour Picks episode. We'll talk about.
The cards are doing a lot of work in this set.
There's a card that basically looks like it's a dead god, and Aklazots, for all intents and purposes, doesn't seem to have the same expression that the other gods do, in being a little bit more
corporeal.
Yeah, he feels more like a beast, whereas the
he is like a literal giant bat.
Yeah. So I feel like he's probably usurped whatever was there before and taken that power for himself. So that says a lot if you can usurp and take over from a god.
Yes.
So yeah, big bad.
So Vito finds that his bat god is all well and good, and that some of the denizens of this inner world are in fact worshipping him. The kind of be-all and end-all of the storylines conclude with Vito basically realising his new bat god, releasing him from his bonds, becoming a demon bat himself, along with many of the Legion of the Dusk following suit. We have the Sun Empire learning to ride giant bats. Bats play a big part of the imagery of this set, and hooking up with their ancient ancestors. There is a giant sun in the centre of this Dyson sphere, called Chimil, which seems to be the sun entity, which all the other sun imagery on Ixalan seems to sort of spurn from. So we're learning a lot about the ancient history of Ixalan.
Well, is it the Olpet? The
Oltec.
Oltec were so the Sun Empire originated from the centre of the Earth.
Yes.
So all of the Sun Empire on the outside weren't actually from the outside originally. They were the initial scouts that then, because of the mycoid, the fungus, which we'll get to in a second, ended up getting sealed away from the inside. So it's almost like there are 3 aspects of Ixalan. You've got the inside world, you've got the outside world, and you've got the world in between.
Caverns,
yeah, which is quite interesting.
So Alkazotz's big plan, and the thing that he wants Vito to kind of help him realise, is that he wants to create an eternal night on Ixalan. And there is, with this sun spirit, Chimil, that's in the centre of this Dyson sphere, there's lots of like broken metal and gemstones. And what it turns out that is actually a broken cage that Alkazots wants to refix around this sun. So you get this idea of all the different gods are kind of constantly in flux and balance, which is a big part of all world mythology, actually. Kind of light and dark gods constantly being at war with each other, none of them besting the other one. On the side of all of this kind of conflict, this is a huge story, really. We have Quintorius is looking for something he calls the Coin Empire, which is a race of beings that he knows very little about, but that's why he's on Ixalan, because he's been tracing them throughout the multiverse to Ixalan and sort of remnants of who they are. We'll get to the Coin Empire later, because it piques my interest specifically, and you showed me something very interesting. We also have something that you mentioned that I haven't mentioned at all yet, the mycoids, the fungus.
Yeah, the potential next Phyrexian race of the multiverse. So the inside and the outside both independently sealed the caverns in between, which is why there was the knowledge of there being an inside or being an... I mean, I imagine the core probably knew about the outside worlds, but obviously couldn't travel there, because the only way to go through is to go through the caverns where the mycoids are taken over. And obviously they were sealed from the other side because there was various... Apart from downtown, the other ways to get to the centre required there to be specific rune magic or sacrifices to take place within like the Temple of Aklazots. So it's kind of... If it hadn't been for the downtown denizens digging through and digging down into it, there's a good chance that, otherwise the mycoids would have stayed still sealed forever. But very much operates like how in The Last of Us, the cordyceps kind of work of where they take over your mind, you become part of the hive mind, but also then you keep all your memories, so it now has access to your memories, and your feelings, and your history, and your understanding. And we'll get to what happens at the end, but... with omen paths being rife that can literally take you to any plane, and then anything can travel through it, and these mycoids are really, really potent. There's another big bad potentially in the multiverse right now.
The leader of the mycoids, or at least the central brain, if you like, is something they call the Myco Tyrant, which He's like, I'm not sure if I dig the look of the micro tyrant. He's even described in the stories, and his card reflects
Reminds me of a shimmy.
He's like this big toad looking thing.
Why does he remind me of a shimmy? Is it a shimmy from Final Fantasy VIII?
Potentially, yes.
Oh man, it's a big mushroomy piece. Yeah,
he's a big mushroomy thing. But I love they're always just they're shown throughout the story of being able to like just hit you with spores or to like put sort of mush or process into your mouth.
Any bite also triggers it.
Yeah, it's
it
very
gets into your
zombie-ish.
bloodstream.
And it's your classic hive mind fungus thing. And like, we know from our real world like how amazing mushrooms are. Like there's mushrooms in forests that are considered to actually be one organism, but just the mushrooms are like different heads that poke up. It's actually one plant, and it's all in sync, it's all in unison.
Mushrooms are the future.
Mushrooms are unfortunately
whether we accept it or not.
But they're also terrifying, as this story reflects.
Yeah.
So we have the Coin Empire, we've got the mycoids, and just all these new different kind of magics that the sort of old tech possess, this Dyson sphere society.
Because it kind of made, as much as when you think about it, like having vampires and pirates and like these really cool bulky merfolk, not the same kind of merfolk we've seen previously.
No, giant frills, huge fins,
and then you've got also humans that ride dinosaurs.
Feathered dinosaurs.
All of this is on one set, and it somehow felt like, again, not meaning to pun, but that was all surface layer kind of like lore and history. If anything, that's like the superfluous, like, that's what the kids are doing now. But this is like looking back through the actual genuine history of it. And then I really hope, because they've done a really good job of setting up a bunch of open threads with this plane, that we will be back somewhat soon. I mean, obviously in terms of cycling, we know we're not going to be back there before at least 2026, because we've pretty much heard everything that's going to be coming out up until about 2025. So we know it's not going to be for the next couple of years, but it definitely sets up to have a lot going on when we do go back there.
So these threads, these cap-offs to all these different points of stories, there's a big climactic battle. Vito gets defeated by Huatli, so him and his demon vampires kind of don't necessarily succeed in destroying the sun on Ixalan.
Yeah, because they need to give Aclazotz enough strength to be able to rebind Chimil within their cage.
Yeah.
Which wasn't originally made by him. It was originally made by the Coin Emperor, which is interesting.
Yes.
But he wanted to re-put that back in to create night, because there was a period, I think it was like 300 years of night when this had happened before they managed to defeat him. And obviously now he's back, but he wasn't fully formed. So he...
So Vito gets defeated himself. However, Alcazot is now in a boat heading for the Chorazon Empire. So that thread is now off there. So he's out and about. That's a threat that exists now.
We get a tiny little point of view of him right at the end.
We do. So we'll talk about the story structure maybe in a second, like of how it's laid out. But yeah, we do get to see his own thoughts. The Mycoids and the Myco Tyrant, although defeated and pushed back in the climactic battle,
I think the Tyrant himself was destroyed.
Well, he was destroyed. His body, but obviously
destroyed.
the very nature of him, we also get a point of view of the Myco Tyrant. So they now piss off. Amalia from the Dusk Legion turns away from Vito pretty much immediately. She was never on side of this plan.
Yeah, I feel like we've seen this, I think, a few times across the Dusk Empire, of where the different factions have different levels of fanaticism. Or some are holy but in the wrong way, some are chaste in the right way, and then there are some who are just like, just trying to be like a normal person.
Yeah, I just happen to be a vampire.
I just happen to be a vampire, exactly.
Yeah, so she goes off with Kellan, Kellan's going to be like our through line. Although now I'm thinking, well, they're building a new little team of people to go through Roman paths. Obviously, last set, Kellan gets introduced. This set, Kellan bumps in, he picks Amalia. Amalia and Kellan are going to go into the next set. They're going to get another guy. It's just going to keep going off.
I hope that doesn't happen, because I kind of like the idea that it's more than just camaraderie between the two of them. I think even it feels, I'm just going to bury the lead here, it does feel massively shoehorned and out of nowhere. But I think there's romantic intention.
Oh, maybe, yeah, but like I reckon they'll make a bigger group.
Oh, God.
So the Mycoids are out, Alcazotz is going out. The Sun Empire wants blood, so they're probably going to like head off to Chorazon. There's a bit where until Huatli's cousin gets killed, and the other members of Huatli's crew sort of are like, well, we want to, go after Chorazon, and she's the one that's always trying to push for peace. So there's an idea there that is also going to have internal fighting, and that some factions will hold off to the Sun Empire.
Yeah, well, off the back of, I know we said we weren't going to talk about it necessarily, but I'm halfway through Pawns, which is the side story of Huatli and Sahili, which takes place actually before any of the other main stories. Like right at the end of the story, Huatli's getting shipped off to our expedition. That expedition is the expedition into the centre of Ixalan.
Yes.
And there's a lot of talk about how the Emperor is a child. He's a child Emperor, and he's got his uncle on one side who's the military tactician who wants to take over and kind of push him towards like being a warlord, and then he's the aunt on the other side who's more about, you know, being down to earth and having spirituality and wanting to see peace kind of reign. So there is actually a lot in that story. Because I highly recommend, if you're going to read the other ones, don't miss out on pawns, because there's a lot of conversation and duplicity between Elenda, Beckett Brass, and I can't remember what her name is, but the aunt from the Sun Empire. Basically, civil war is happening within each faction, and then across Ixalan, but there are denizens of each of the factions that are trying to kind of keep peace together instead of just going back into an all-out war off the back of the invasion war.
We never get a full reconciliation of what the River Heralds are doing. I feel like, once again, they've been slightly sidelined. We had Comena in the last trip to Ixalan, but they've even been at the forefront.
He was very compelling. Like, it was quite nice to see that kind of the it's my right kind of character. You know, the prince that's been told his entire life that he's going to be better or be geared up for something impressive. And to be fair, he was the one who got to the immortal sun.
Well, there is a line, isn't there, where there's an uneasy sort of truce at one point between the Sun Empire crew and the River Herald crew, the Merfolk. And there's a little bit of friction, and one of them says something like, "Oh, thank you so much for reminding us that it was in fact the Sun Empire who stole the Golden City from us," or like took the Golden City for themselves. And then one of Huatli's friends says, "Well, let's just forget the first person to try and claim that power for themselves was a River Herald." Yeah. It's like, you're not so fucking right.
Yeah, no one's better than each other. But I do stand by. I think that, because you said this when you kind of found out about them before reading about them, about the cat folk, you know, the Cavern cat folk, which to me, I always get really bugged out by the fact that, like, how can you live in constant darkness? Because they don't have access to either the centre or the exterior.
No, but a lot of their artwork shows that they've got like sort of fluorescent or effervescent.
Yeah, I suppose
fungus. And
I do feel like what they do in the capacity they take, what they do within the story, or their character capacity, is that they waylay the heroes and put them in a cell for a little while, and and it looks
specifically
like
Vito and his crew.
That's the end of the journey, and then they get broken out, and then the Merfolk kind of do the exact same thing. So I feel like the Merfolk and the Malamet. Sure. The catfolk and the merfolk basically serve the same function within the story, so it kind of annoys me that they added this whole new faction just to make them go, cool, right, you're no longer relevant anymore. And they sound really, really prestigious, and they sound super self-righteous, like they've got all of this legacy behind them, but you never really see any of it. And you only see it for a moment before then they run away, and then they find this random merfolk cavern, which has the door that accesses the centre of the Dyson sphere.
Got one of the Shapers is there.
Yeah, like, and it kind of feels like they could have just been the Merfolk again. And maybe the reason they didn't is they didn't want to have there to be unnecessary conflict, because they'd have just broken out of their cells. But I think that maybe those two things could have been combined. So I don't know what adding catfolk to this plane or to this story really adds.
Well, okay, so I've got a thought about this. So that's kind of all the different story threads that I've wrapped up. If it sounds like it's very disjointed, I think what this set needed was, remember when Neon Dynasty came out, Kamigawa, and it was right at the peak of where people were very concerned that the way that Magic treats cultures outside of America, or indeed outside of Western and European cultures, maybe wasn't as sensitive as they would treat American or Western and European cultures in terms of the way they present them, right?
I mean, they did an exactly perfect job for New Capenna.
Well, I mean, they did actually. Yeah, it was a very good deconstruction.
I mean, they didn't put the police in there, but apart from that,
well, no,
that's
because
the only criticism.
Yeah, but like, so that, like, they did this big push to be like, no, we've brought on things like cultural advisors, and we've got leads on the set or people who actually know about like what we're trying to express, but also doing it in like a magic-y way. And they did that thing with I think was it Kelly Diggs? Oh god, I'm just throwing out names there, but they did that like 20-minute video, didn't they? Of being
panel.
Like, yeah, there was a panel of being like, look, we know that when we did Kamigawa the first time, it was basically a bunch of Western people being like, we think ninjas are cool, and we think samurai are cool, and we're going to make them magical. And it's like, that's not quite how you do it. So it's like, right, well, what are the weapons they use? What's the style of dress?
How do we be sensitive to a culture that still actually has relevance in history and people know about?
Whilst making it accessible and magic, like, and what I feel like they should have done, and I hold my hands up high in the air and just be like, I do not know a lot about Central American and Mesoamerican.
Well, I mean, the idea, right, is that it was supposed to be a combination of Caribbean and South American, right?
Sure, because of the West India Trading Company and stuff.
Exactly, that kind of thing.
But like, it's not a part of the world that I have a huge in-depth knowledge of their culture or their myths and legends about outside of some pop culture stuff. And I'm not going to beat myself up too harsh about that because, there are people who make it their entire careers to learn about cultures, if that they're not a part of. So I can't know everything about every culture. No. But what I would have loved is some sort of, from Wizards, panel where through the lens of Magic the Gathering, because this is the game that I'm playing, they just go, we chose to use this style of dress from this part of Central America because that's what it means to us for this, that, and the other. And I go, cool, I can relate that to what I'm looking at, and I think that's a big problem with this set. My other theory about this set, sorry to keep talking for a long time, is I heard a rumour, was this on a different podcast or a video or something someone said, like a proper rumour, I don't even know where it came from, that this was going to originally be a non-Ixalan set.
This wasn't originally going to be... They wanted to do a underground set. A set based in the underground. The more they did it, the more they realised, actually, this could all just be set on the plane of Ixalan. And at that point, they then used Ixalan as almost the framing for that kind of story, which is why I think sometimes some aspects of the world building feel like they don't deserve to be part of the plane.
Maybe the cat folk.
Everything on the inside, everything in the caverns that's distinctly within the caverns does feel like it was supposed to be of something else that
because they have giant insect things that you don't see anywhere else on Ixalan.
Exactly. And it's very easy to go, and it was all sealed away. And I'm like, that's Grokable as an excuse. But then when you think about it, that it kind of falls apart a little bit. And I think that very much is a very fair point of where you can tell that they bookended the caverns on the inside with trying to balance what the world in the core looks like, in comparison to the outside, and then the inside is just don't worry about it. We made all these really cool trap rooms that don't really make sense when you think about it. Yeah, but we already made all the trap rooms, so we're going to keep them in the story.
I suppose so that's the negatives maybe, or the kind of problems with it, because I actually have a lot of fondness for this storyline. But the positives, I think, mean that it almost comes with a ready-made structure for huge world building. Because you just fucking know the next time that we go to Arcavios, they're going to set it in the goddamn school again.
There they are. It's been confirmed. The next time we go back there, we're not going to do a further exploration of the plane. We're going to.
Whereas with this one, it's we could just do another island, but why would
they did the opposite almost. There was very little of anything of the previous story, apart from a little bit of the politics and the reason why all the places are where they are. It didn't feel like a retread. It felt like more exploration. It felt like more world building because you're building the inside of the world because you've done the outside of the world.
Which, when you compare it to something like Ravnica, and now Ravnica is a great example of how they've tricked you, I think. I always think
it seems massively huge, but actually
it's all on 10th
district.
The 10th district.
Where are the other 9 districts? Where's beyond
the rubble? Else?
Where's beyond the rubble belt?
It's a plain wide city. Yeah. They can't just be 10 districts. But it's clean because it's 10 clear defined factions and they've all got personality and this, that, and the other.
Well, once you've done a little bit of all of the guilds in the set, there's no room for anything else. You've just done, what are the guilds up to now? And also, would Ravnica feel like Ravnica if you weren't focusing on the
exactly.
guilds?
But that's the exact polar opposite of this set, where actually maybe it's a little bit messy with all the different factions because each one of them has this kind of, you could do an entire set on each one of them and just being this is the Brazen Coalition versus each other.
Well, exactly. There's a lot of criticism of how there aren't a lot of pirates in the set, and if you think about it, that's because there was only 2 pirates in the story. Yes, in Pawns you get to see a lot more of the Brazen Coalition, and you get to see a lot more of the outside world because all of that's set on the outside. But when you're going through, you can't have pirate ships in the caverns, and none of the pirates came from the inside.
Indeed, the entire point of Malcolm and Breach's storyline is the fact that all of their crew is getting killed off instantly and that there's no one in downtown.
Yeah, because they weren't able to permeate further. So the entirety of the town of downtown, and this is actually, there's a couple of moments that are really ominous. And one of them they find is as they're going down, they see they're going down through all the different mines. They get to a point of where they see one cavern that looks slightly different from the others. So they go inside, and this is where they've still got a party of 10 or 12 people or whatever. And they go inside, and then they start seeing movement. And the movement's concerning because they've not seen anything. It's a ghost town at this point. And it turns out it's zombified dinosaurs, which don't react to being attacked in any way, shape, or form. Because, with zombies and stuff like that, unless you, decapitate the head or something, getting stabbed or losing a limb doesn't really faze them. They still just go in, I'm going to attack you.
They're full of fungus.
And then as they're running back and away, they just see smeared on the ground in blood just the word down.
Yeah.
And they have a choice as to do we go up or do we go down? And then they go down and
Yeah,
things get worse. And it's kind of interesting, as you say, like, the reason why there aren't many pirates, I think, in the set is because just there weren't very many pirates that made it that far. Even the ones that made it that far, all of them died, apart from
literally
this
all
random
died.
one siren and a monkey.
Little goblin, yeah.
Speaking of, I think we can start now getting to like more like individual kind of points. Did you realise, and I didn't realise before, how voice magey? Because obviously he's a siren.
Oh, Malcolm.
But when Malcolm did his song, like, I don't remember that being a thing he could do before.
Well, no. So what I garner from it, because there's a point in the story, what you're referring to, I think, is there's a point in the story where he, to kind of calm everyone down, he uses his siren song to like stop people from freaking out and like to kind of take a breath because everyone's like losing their shit, right? So yeah, I don't think that's something they dwell on, but from just from the way that they've written it, to me, it sounds like, because sirens are a big part of the Brazen Coalition, it's something that they don't do because it's like OP.
It's like in I hate to use this reference. It's like in Fantastic Beasts, like the girl who can like convince you of things or read your mind. She just doesn't like doing it because it's invasive.
It's like rude.
And it's the similar idea, right? Of where, because sirens typically are presented as being pretty malicious, you know. Like,
they're dragging you to your death.
Yeah, whereas I guess the idea is that these are like, I don't want to say tame, but these like civilized sirens, you know.
They're your mates.
It wouldn't be cool. It's like having, if you had X-ray vision, it's like don't look at my nipples.
Yeah,
you know?
Stop looking at my crotch.
Yeah, right. That's one of those kinds of things. But it's just quite interesting to see him being like, because they did feel like there was a lot of plot armor on the two of them. Like there were so many points where he's like, "Oh shit, where's Breaches?" And you're like, if that was any other non-named character, as soon as he disappeared, he's dead in like 6 different ways. But he just goes, "Oh, I need to go back and pick up my friend," and then inexplicably, the next time you see them, they're just back together again. It's like,
I mean, there's a lot of flim flam with Breaches. His gun that he's like sort of
Big Boom,
the Big Boom that they've softballed. So
or is it Big Bang? I can't remember what he calls it. Does he call it Big Boom? I think he calls it.
He calls it. So there's a gun in the story for the benefit of
cannon.
It's like a hand cannon.
Well, it's like, I feel like it's more like a rocket launcher.
That Malcolm never wants Breaches to use, and then at the very pivotal moment,
Big Boom.
he uses it.
Yeah.
So it's something called Big Boom, but Malcolm goes, well, it should be called Big Froom or something because of the noise it makes.
Because it doesn't actually, didn't do. It's like a fireball rather than an explosive.
Yeah, but there's like the plot armor of like the way that Breaches is carrying it around. He's just carrying it around on like a sling on his back and like a bag.
He's just had it the entire time.
And it's like, motherfucker, like if I was carrying around like a nuke on my back, do you know what I mean? I'd be like, I wouldn't be being tossed around in this Dyson sphere by a bunch of bat gods and like, you know, and then just suddenly, it's still fine.
Yeah,
it's like, I'd explode immediately.
In my mind, I thought it was like a bit of stick of dynamite or something. And right there, he goes like, "Oh yeah, use it." Then he just goes,
it's like a giant
and he pulls
cannon,
out this. It's like, where's that been the entire fucking
It seems to be quite ornate. It's got like leaf designs on it and everything.
You were climbing ropes and falling down mines and shit,
yeah.
and that survived. Fuck off out of it.
But you know, because they're the comic relief characters. Although Malcolm seems quite
level-headed.
But he seems quite like what's the word? He's got a lot of ennui. The wrap up to his story.
Really fish out of water.
He's going back to the Brazen Coalition, and like the last line of his story in this one is that he wants to find the bottom of a tankard to kind of drown his sorrows.
Yeah,
like, oh my god,
he's very much like, "Oh, not this again."
Yeah, I kind of feel like he'd be much more at home. He should have gone through a fucking omen path. He'd be much more at home going to like just a coffee shop in like Ravnica or some shit.
I feel like he's a bit more. He feels more down to earth as characters go. Like I find a lot of the Sun Empire difficult to relate to because you know they have more of an ancient civilization kind of thing. Like their cultural values and stuff are a little bit different to mine. Whereas a pirate, I can get being selfish and being self-serving. that makes sense to me, you know? I can even technically kind of understand from the vampire point of view, like why some would feel disenfranchised, whereas some go, well, this is my entire life, and if I don't believe it and believe it even harder, my entire life falls apart. That's something that's very relatable for average Earth humans because, you know, that kind of shit happens a lot with some religions. Can't really relate to mushrooms. Bit hard to relate to mushrooms.
Well, on a personal level.
Yeah. I mean, from a food point of view, delicious. I'm sure. Nom, tasty.
Yes, but a food point of view.
Yes. But in terms of like, I feel like Malcolm is probably the lens, and I feel like his story is the most like I don't want to say the word realistic because it's not, but it feels the most like, oh, okay, yeah, I can understand that.
Yeah, there's a line. Is it a Malcolm line? The only thing I screenshotted, like this is a much looser episode than what some of the other story breakdowns we've done, but there's one that I did screenshot who is it? Oh, it's Waiter, or Whiter, as we've been saying, but I think it's Waiter you pronounce it. She's the other slightly down-to-earth character.
True, because she's younger. She left the Sun Empire to join.
Yeah,
the
she's a
Brazen
Sun Empire
Coalition.
former pirate.
Yeah,
and then she's back in the
got
Sun
an eye patch
Empire
because she went and got an eye patch, and then she came back. I don't know if the invasion happened before she did. I think it did happen before, and then she got disenfranchised. So she went, "I'm gonna leave," but every day she left, she felt the sun on her, and she was like reminded of.
She's
home.
got a wanderlust that the pirates kind of sufficed, but she didn't like their selfish lifestyle, so she went back home to the Sun Empire, but she was getting bored of just being told what to do all the fucking time.
Yeah, so doing an expedition to the Central Earth, she's like, sign me up.
Yeah, exactly. She also has sort of aspirations to be a warrior poet.
Yeah. She looks up to Huatley a lot.
But I think that's her characterization is really good, because I think they kind of explain that one, she doesn't actually think she could be a warrior poet, but it is that creativity, that wanderlust that she has. There's a line that she says where she turns to Malcolm, in fact, so maybe that's where I got it from, about all this big battle. And it's very much Age of Ultron, Hawkeye talking to Scarlet Witch.
Yeah, like, we're fighting aliens. And,
I'm a guy with a bow and arrow.
None of this makes any sense.
And it's, Waiter, Malcolm said, relieved. What is going on here? Let me explain, Waiter said. Then paused. No, there is too much. Let me sum up. The vampires have transformed into bat monsters, and their god is imprisoned in the sun. A giant mushroom is infecting people and turn them into puppets so it can take over the plane. Waiter snorted. Well, I'll have to get in line. Do you think it could infect a god? ? And it's just like...
That's a big question in itself.
Well, yeah, there is that. But it's just the fact of going, fucking mushroom zombies. Oh, yeah, vampire demons.
Yeah. Which one? Pick your poison.
Yeah. And I kind of liked that. And I kind of, it
does feel very silly. I have it written down here. I was like, having multiple this is shit and bad and dangerous threats built independently does create an aspect of double jeopardy. But also, with everything happening all at once... it's kind of, it feels like it all happens kind of conveniently because it's all happening at the same time.
So let's talk about that. I think it's a very good point. The way that Valerie Valdez writes this is, it's not something that's like, it's not groundbreaking. A lot of writers have done this, but it's the first time that I've really liked it. Now, I've liked it. I think you and I have spoken about this previously before recording. You weren't 100% sure. So the way that she breaks each episode down, the reason that it feels like it's this one continuous stream is because it's not like episode 1, this is the point of view of the Sun Empire. Episode 2, this is the Dusk Legion. Every story has like maybe 500 to 700 words of like one person's point of view from one party, and then jumps to like, so it goes from Waiter to Vito to Huatley to Amalia, and it kind of bounces around like that.
Yeah, it never sticks with the same point of view of each party as well. Sometimes you'll get Amalia, and then sometimes you'll get Vito, and sometimes I think you even once get Bartolome. I think, and maybe even his vice or whatever it is. But each time you get a different view of the same journey from that party. And obviously each of them also has their own opinion and feelings about what they're doing and why they're doing it.
Why didn't it work for you?
I think, it's not that I don't think it works. I think what I mean when I say that it's a lot of things happening independently is it kind of feels... Again, it's one of those things where the story wouldn't be worth telling unless it was happening like this. But it does feel a little contrived that all of these things are happening. It's the moment when they all happen to fall into the same
pit,
cavern,
whatever it was,
you know. And it's like there's one moment of where you have like the Dust Legion get caught, and then they go there, and then the Sun Empire find their way, and then Malcolm falls out from a hole from the top, followed by all these microwave. I'm like, did all roads lead to Rome? I don't understand. You know, like I get it because it makes sense. Because again, it creates this. All of these different journeys need to kind of hit a finality point, so you can then just focus everything on the end goal, which is this double battle, very Star Wars-esque, of the bats fighting the Sun Empire, and then, well, not just Sun Empire, the Oltecs as well, and then the Oltec also fighting with, we haven't really mentioned at all, the Echoes.
Oh, the ghosts, which Contoris brings out.
Yeah, it's basically they're like your ancestors, but they actually have not corporeal because they're spirits, but they stick around, they have conversations, they remember how they died, all that kind of thing. It's much easier to hold on to your culture when your culture doesn't really actually die. But they're all fighting then the mycoid threat as well, and this is all kind of happening all at the same time. And it works because it all does build to a very similar crescendo, and it does also work in the fact that every time you finish one point of view, it kind of finishes on a micro cliffhanger. So you're like, oh, but then we left them in that position. Then it goes, back to Vito, and you go, oh yeah, shit, because they were like, this is where they were left off in the last story. And then it goes to the next one.
Well, that's why
it's constant excitement.
That's why it works for me. Because there's a lot going on, there's a lot to go through, but it makes everything feel like it is part of the same journey, even though they're literally going on different pathways. And it keeps everything moving, I think, at a nice pace. Because it's 6 episodes. We were talking a lot about it earlier on, but actually we haven't mentioned it recently. Usually it's 5, or if they want to do a huge arc, they do the full 10, which is like feels like a lot. But this 6-episode arc felt like there's a lot in there. But it felt like it was going at a pace because I was just like...
It was chunked nice and...
And you could go, right, that's the zombies, now move to the pirates, now move to the Sun Empire, now back to the vampires. And you're like, cool, like, you know, you're just kind of bouncing around. I guess the negative is, like, yeah, you can't... Like, there are so many characters that maybe you kind of forget who this person is or what that person is doing from chunk to chunk. But by episode, like, 3...
You get used to it.
And
I think the only thing is there are certain chunks that I feel like probably could be omitted in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah, of course.
For the sake of pacing. But again, because they're broken out, if you were to read these day by day individually, at no point would any of them ever feel like they were taking up too much time or too much space or felt too fluffy.
And you could jump in because you could, like, I did it last night. So I was halfway through, I think, episode 4. And I was like, it was like 1 a.m. I was like, I gotta go to sleep. So I went, right, I'm just going to go down until the next person. And then I was able to stop and not feel like I was like, well, I've got to pick up that story again.
Exactly.
You know,
it didn't matter.
Nice.
It didn't matter where you ended it because nothing felt like you needed to get to the next story to then complete that arc.
Yeah.
Because again, even like the individual arcs had their micro journeys as well. It is very interesting that we're no point do we ever see the point of view of Kellen.
No,
but
he's
we do
always
get the point of view of Quint, which is interesting. Because I thought at first it was like, oh, we're just not going to get the point of view of anyone who's not from the plane.
Yeah, the interlopers.
Because you don't get Sahili until Pawns. You don't get Quint, I think, until the epilogue. I think there's maybe one, maybe 2 chapters that he gets, but it's mostly focused on Whiter and Huatley. And I don't even think
Intel gets.
I don't think he gets one. I think because I think it would be too heartbreaking to have his point of view as he dies.
Intel dead.
Yeah, exactly.
Intel gets like brutally deaded as well.
Oh yeah. I mean, I think there's always. I find that the biggest thing that annoyed me in this story was the handling of the vampires once they get like uberfied. Because I don't think in any of the images we see, even when Vito's like actively in the throes of doing a thing that should be after he's converted, in the pictures on the cards, he's not. He just looks like a normal vampire.
Vito doesn't. Vito is very much. I noticed this as well because the formatting on the mothership for everyone who's read these fucking stories, you know, is that they use card art quite nicely as like way to like hint big parts of the storyline, even if it's not necessarily directly related, to give you an idea of like what the catfolk look like or whatever else.
Yeah, exactly.
And
a reference point.
It's the bit where Huatley's about to spear Vito. Magic writers love a good spear, don't they? There's like spears with names.
Elspeth's got it twice.
Quite. So there's that bit, and they talk about Vito's monstrous bat hands and his big wings.
He doesn't have them.
In the picture, he's got the wings, but other than that, it's just
Vito.
normal
Vito.
In other cards, because I went to look at the card for this exact point. It's funny you brought this up. This exact thing, I looked in Scryfall Gallery. We all use Scryfall nowadays. And other bat demons are more battified.
Because there are vampire demons in it. I think there's 2 of them in the set.
Well, Vito's card is a vampire demon.
But he doesn't feel like a vampire demon. He might be a demonic vampire in status, but he doesn't look like he doesn't. Like a demonic vampire, which, okay, whatever. There's the whole Luca debacle of how he was treated with his bonded beast. So, like, there's been worse handlings than it has been in this. I'm just going to quickly check to see if there's anything else I want to talk about before we get to the spicy.
Oh, sure. Well, I mean, whilst you're looking at that, Amalia, our cartographer...
Right, yeah,
Cartomancer. Now, I actually so this is real bias from me from looking at a card and then reading the story, because I didn't read these until some of the spoilers came out. And when her card got shown and her character design got shown, and this is nothing against the artists, because the actual art of the character, the actual painting of these people is a very like good magic grade painting. I wasn't thrilled that she seemed like really nice and a bit cutesy, and she had these big round glasses on.
Yeah, she's very much like the, oh no teacher, how dare you give me detention.
Well, I didn't mean it in that kind of way, but she seemed like she had like a big round face, and like other than the pointy ears and the fangs.
If she didn't have that, she would just look like
to me. Do you know what she looked like? She looked like a Strixhaven character.
I was going to say the exact same thing. Yeah, gave me Ruther vibes. Same kind of almost like glasses. Kind of, it was almost like when Ruther's little like teeth, little tough stick out.
But she looks like a nice version of like whatever that is. So I was a bit disappointed. I did like her character. I didn't think she was too twee or cutesy. She obviously had a moral compass that is different from other vampires. I liked the cartography magic, the fact that she could use her own blood to make the map kind of appear in the place that she was in.
Yeah, and change the landscape around her. Had she mapped it, she could edit it.
She wiped out a wall on a floor plan
Yeah.
and the wall disappeared. It's like, that seems way OP, doesn't it? Doesn't it?
But yeah, absolutely. But then when you look at when you look at her card, like, it's way more than just her just going, I'm just going to draw the little picture. Like, no, things are happening. Like, geometrics and stuff are happening. Like, I find magic like that much more interesting because it's not as easy to grok. Like, being a pyromancer, I'm like, you get hot. I don't need to know where the fire comes from, but you get hot. Good. Whereas if you've got, like, say, a cartographer, or Quintoris, for example, like, Lawhold magic is really interesting because it is almost like taking the spell out of the book, almost like Tamio did.
Well, her
stories have strength and power, and it feels like it's
magic.
Similar.
He has to have Abuela be who's the male. Is it Abuela?
Abuelo is granddad.
Abuelo.
Yeah,
Abuelo
Abuela is grandma and Abuelo is granddad.
Yeah, so Abuelo, who is the male echo that he kind of summons, has to be bound to the poncho that was his, right? And that is the limitation. So yeah, I do like her magic because it does seem like it has some rules.
Yeah.
And
like,
she has to have a parchment.
Yeah.
What's she going to do? If I can draw it like...
And she has to be at least... And she has to have mapped it properly first for her then to be able to interact and change it.
She has to use her own blood, it seems.
And it's not exact because there are times when she uses it that it doesn't necessarily go so well.
Yeah.
But it is also really interesting to see, as much as it is ridiculously powerful when you think about it.
Just draw a castle. Oh, we're in a castle now.
Yeah,
Fuck
exactly.
off.
Yeah. I guess I guess she has to... It's one of these things of... she probably suffers for not having an imagination to be able to do it because she's...
What a dickhead. She can't even imagine it.
But because her job is so much like an architect would be, to draw things in the correct manner,
sure,
to then draw things out, not be correct, or to... Like, because most things we see her is erasing it. So she erased a bridge and she erased a wall. Didn't
she make a bridge?
I thought she erased the bridge, which is why then the goblins fall down and Kennen...
Oh, no, you're right.
So it's much easier to erase a stroke than it is to... It's much easier to take something away that you know is there than to create something that you don't know is there.
Yeah, sure. I'm just doing that classic thing of like, well, who's more powerful, Goku or Superman? It's like,
Yeah.
If I had the power to have a map that I could change anything, I wouldn't be fucking living in London, I'll tell you that much. Right?
I feel like the only thing I didn't like about her character is I feel like her naivety, or even her, like, youth youthfulness. There's almost like a youthfulness to her, beguiles and undermines the fact that she's a vampire. Because how old is she? How recently has she been blooded? Do they just blood anybody at this point? Like, what makes her different?
Well, so yeah, I agree.
And I think she comes from a high status, so I think she's sheltered.
All the vampires are, though. Isn't that the idea?
Yeah,
that
their
Torozon,
nobility.
Yeah, because they have humans in Torozon,
yeah.
but they're the lower classes.
There's a whole vast, as we find out in Pawns, there's a whole area between the coast and the actual like main area of Torozon, Atla Torozon, which is what the vampires take, which is just known as like the human lands, and it's just basically all of the people they feed.
We also see Torozon in the Vivian Reed 3-part, don't we?
Yeah, but I feel like because we see it from her point of view, it's
a
very skewed understanding.
And again, it's very specific. She goes into like the fighting bits.
Yeah, it makes it feel a little bit... It felt, to be fair, that could have taken place on Fiora, and I wouldn't have known the difference.
Fair enough.
You know what I mean? I do feel like, maybe it explains... And I think actually this does come up in the story a lot of where, because she's almost like from the gentrified populace, there's almost this kind of like... You don't know how the real world works because you don't come from the real world. And it's like, well, yeah, if you come from a race of vampire nobility that are super, religious, then you're not going to really have an understanding of the down-to-earthness of things. And this is probably why her and Kennen get along so well, because Kennen's the eternal, happy-go-lucky, everyone could be my friend. And it's funny that he kind of, sits there with all these vampires and doesn't quite clock for a little while, this might not be the best people to be
he's
with.
definitely in, the evil group.
But it's funny that he randomly omen pass into the centre of the Caverns of Ixalan. Imagine how many new places of planes are being discovered with omen paths, because you actually just get to go, I didn't know this plane was hollow. It's like, no one did, but the omen path went there.
How many bathrooms? Do you know what I mean?
That's what you mean.
I just walk in through an open path being like, a brave new world, and then there's some Minotaur having a shit in Ravnica.
I'm imagining the opposite of where the Minotaur's having a shit and the open path appears in the bowl, so it's just
what is this new
just Minotaur shit flying at you. Right, great. But it's also a comment.
Okay.
There is also, now we're speaking about it, a comment about how the omen paths aren't stable. So Sahidi talks about, she sent a message out to Kaladesh and to Strixhaven. She turned around and goes, well, I lied, actually, I couldn't find an open path to Kaladesh, but the omen path to Strixhaven is consistent. It keeps coming back, so I don't think they're fully stable, which is interesting.
Isn't that in line very much with I mean, I'm now thinking through the mists of time back to when Kaldheim was fresh. Old school magic.
Yeah, the original Omen Paths.
I mean, the Doom Scars and the Omen Paths were meant to be sort of these kind of fissures, these rips, right?
I guess the Doom Scar was. Well, I mean, apart from it being prophesized to be Ragnarok, and it was always
Yeah.
Apart from that, it was always going to happen.
But it's a chaotic thing.
Yeah, the idea is that only the gods could actually create them, because I mean that's the whole point of the sword, right? Is the sword could create Omen Paths deliberately, and that's what made it really.
Well, I think. Oh god, now I'm really casting my mind back. I think you could create them deliberately with the Sword of the Realms.
Yeah.
But I think they did appear.
Exactly, but they well, again, it wasn't strictly like you knew where they were going.
No, it was just going to be a hole in the middle of the woods.
Like, we're going to have to come back to this idea of, remember we used to say, imagine where if your first planeswalk is to like the pits of wrath. It's like, this is true now, but you're not a planeswalker that can then planeswalk back again. You're just stuck there.
My favourite one is just imagine if you just go into the seas of. Oh my god, Ikoria. Yeah. Just like, oh, what's this place? Ah, giant Mezzo sword just comes out of the water.
Yeah. You finally get out of the get out of the water and the sharks are flying above you. And you're like, this isn't helping, this isn't better.
This is hell. I come from Gold Meadow.
And also, does that mean that random behemoths and things can destroy through Omen Pass into other planes?
Depends how big the
I guess we're gonna
is.
find out over the next few years about the Omen Pass.
Imagine if there was an Omen Path so big that it just appeared under like a lake or something,
and the whole thing just went
straight through.
Yeah, there's a lot of things they can do with this. We're straying.
Anyway,
let's come back
to the spice.
Yeah, the spice. Right. So one of our final point of view chapters. So we get to see the point of view of Aklazots. We get to see the final point of view of the Myco Tyrant to kind of have these two big bad bastards who are like, oh, I'm still alive and I'm going to do evil things.
They don't like the goodies don't kill any of the bad guys except for Vito, but he was only a pawn of the big bad guy.
Exactly. This is the thing. Like, a lot of people are saying like, well, nothing really happened. It's like so much happened.
No.
They just none of it was finished.
None of it was
finished.
Yeah.
You know? Pandora ain't here, but the box is open. Yeah, for sure. We get the point of view of Quint, who they say... So there's a... Let me get to the point. I think it's called Kingdom's Edge or something. You're going to have to cut out some dead air here in a second, because I'm going to have to find it properly, because it... I reread it earlier as well, just to make sure I didn't miss any parts of it. I think I reread it after we had our big discussion about who they might be, what they might be, and what it means.
All the big questions.
The big questions. Episode 6. Right down to the bottom. Quint. God, these are big-ass chapters. There we go. Let's scroll back a little bit so I can see it more clearly. Myco Tyrant, Aklazots. There we go. So, Colony's End. Because that's the other thing, we don't really get like a massive... I do think one of the biggest hang-ups I have of this is that because so much was happening, they kind of had to gloss over the gods and Chimil and kind of how that all formed. I think they'll probably come back to that next time and give us a bit more grounding on it. Because if they started in the centre and then went their way out, like how were they able to develop in the centre? When Chimil get put there?
Yeah.
All those kinds of questions, you know. Like, I have more questions about their culture now than I did beforehand when we knew about this inner realm or whatever.
Yes, yeah.
But he goes to the Oltec area called of Journey's End, which juts out the side of a mountain, where this big spaceship ruin, which now I look at it, has aspects of Thranness to it, but I think that anything circular and swirly is just going to look Thran to me after the Thran. Which also, looking back at it, you know, they made this big deal in Dominion United about these big Thran portals and stuff.
Yes.
And yeah, they made the Temporal Gateway.
Yes.
None of the actual Thran stuff had any relevance to anything.
Well, it's just there.
Big swirly metal thing that looked like a gate that was going to do something cool.
Oh, when the Kiar.
Yeah, it did nothing.
Yeah, no, you're right.
Why is Kiar always so like, hey, look at Amanatu and Liliana together? Psych. Never happened. Never happens.
Well, that was for
Kiar.
That was for a Masters set.
I know, but fucking bastards. Honestly.
The biggest one is the March of the Machines.
Yeah, we had all these different characters side by side that never cross paths with each other.
They split off from that idea. Didn't they?
Exactly. Anyway,
what are you gonna do?
Kiar is misdirection 101. So basically, he's at Colony's End, exploring this big. I guess I will call it a spaceship. That the didacts of the Oltec call colonizers, which is kind of interesting that there were colonizers from another plane when there were also colonizers from another continent, all happening within the same thing. Colonization obviously being a big part of South American culture. So he finally goes up into it and he says that it's very similar, or it's very distinct from any other kind of ruins that he's been in, of where it feels cold, it feels empty, it feels almost like inert. You know, it doesn't feel like there's no moss growing anywhere, there's no foliage or anything, it's almost completely and utterly sterile. And as he's trying to map out the place, it's also I really like Quint's personality when it's being described non-verbally, like not through. When he's being described without him talking.
I really like this character when he shuts the fuck
Basically,
up.
yeah, no, I like. But it's almost like because there's things where he had a choice to go. He finds stairs going up and going down, and before he even decides going up or going down, he goes, "No, let me finish mapping this particular level." You know, he's quite methodical. And then
he's a student of history.
And when he gets to the stairs, he doesn't instinctively go up or down. He flips a coin to say which direction should I go in, which I think is actually kind of like the fairest way to do it. You know, you kind of avoid.
It's a nice little character trait. He doesn't really care where he's going as long as he's going to do it right.
He loves knowledge. He just loves new stuff, and he keeps saying this throughout. That because people keep telling him, like, "Well, you're not from here. What are you going to do with all of our history?"
Well, this is another little side wrinkle I was going to bring up later. That's a really on point.
Yeah, and we'll talk about that because obviously as British people.
Yeah. I think we've mentioned this in a couple of previous episodes. Our UK heritage really precludes us from having many opinions about
stuff. There aren't very many countries that you look at their entire history and go, "Oh, you were always good people." You know, like I don't think there's a single country that doesn't have a little bit of an oopsie or a slip up because imperialism is a really difficult thing to balance fairly.
Yeah, we definitely won imperialism, didn't we?
Yeah. Well, I don't know. No, the Romans definitely won imperialism.
Well, where are the Romans now, mate?
In Italy?
Well, we've got a whole museum. We've still got a whole museum of shit that we've stolen from the rest of the world.
Let's not do this.
Don't make me be like defending the British Museum.
No, stop defending British imperialism.
We should give the Elgin marbles back.
I agree. Good. We should roll them down the hill back to
We should give it all back. I just want to make that fucking clear.
God, empty the coffers. Give it all back.
We have our own culture. That's a different podcast.
Anyway. So, this coin empire that that looks to have a completely abandoned spaceship.
Oh, yeah, magic. We're talking about Magic the Gathering. Right? Okay, cool.
He finally, I mean, the coin flip goes down instead of up, which I think was kind of an ironic symmetry to Malcolm and Breaches, where they had the decision to go up or go down. They chose to keep going down, and what did that bring them? Well, what does Quint find? He finds, instead of the same very, very large furniture, like everything being very large and feeling out of proportion. Yes. Nothing feeling lived in absolutely whatsoever. And then he goes downstairs into another room that's got pods.
Fucking stasis
pods. Now, Prometheus, the film, this is what is happening right now.
A little bit, yeah.
Even the ship has this weird round kind of thing. I'm like, you're just doing Prometheus.
The space jockey.
Yeah, you're just doing a Prometheus here, aren't you? Like, just give me a face.
Quint's about to do a Prometheus, everyone.
It does feel like that because all of these chambers are empty, broken out of, the ominous kind of like, oh god, I wonder what was in there. And as he says, it's like, oh, this is just giving me more answers and more questions than answers. Mm-hmm. Apart from one.
Yes. One pod.
At the end, it still contains something. So he goes there and he does the smart thing that every archaeologist always does when they find something really ancient that probably hasn't been touched by anyone in years. They touch it. And then there's this dull, loud clang as the pod kind of reactivates. And he doesn't stop at this point and go, okay, this is pretty bad. He then goes up to like the foggy outside, because obviously it's got dust and stuff on the outside of it. It kind of gives it a wipe to see what's inside.
Yeah, classic.
Cloudy liquid inside. And again, this just reminds me of the Final Fantasy VII Mako reactor bit, where Cloud goes with Sephiroth and he looks into one of the fucking pods to see what's in it. And then as the murky liquid like kind of becomes more and more translucent and see-through, he sees it as a giant body. A large grey skin, large limbs. Let me actually get the exact terminology because this is interesting. It also speaks of there being another specimen that he had found previously.
Very, very early in the story, well, when they first go into the caverns, the first room that the Sun Empire find that's kind of beyond the threshold of the caverns, there's a giant, it's not skeleton they describe it as, but it's the remains of a long dead giant with horns.
And at the time, I didn't really think anything of that because I thought it could have just been any old monster.
Yes.
Not realising that it could have been humanoid, it could have been sentient, it could have been clever.
But none of the other monsters that they encounter in the caverns match
that. And you don't really think about that until... I didn't think about it until he mentioned it at the end. I was like, oh shit, yeah, that was right at the beginning. So he ambled over, peering through the glass. The interior was cloudy, opaque. Was there anything inside? With his handkerchief, he swiped at the surface, then cupped his hands to the sides of his eyes and pressed his face to the container to get a better look. With a deep clang, the tank lit up. Now, the fact that all of this technology is still working is also very interesting.
Yes.
Quint scooted back nervously. What had he done? What was happening? You fool. Inside the container, smoky air swirled, then slowly dissipated, revealing the body of an enormous creature. It was so tall, Quint couldn't see its head, and from where he stood, only thick, grey-skinned legs and hands that ended in claws. What a discovery! This specimen was far more intact than the one in Otlacan. But how could he possibly transport it? He'd have to return to the others and bring a team back to... The creature's fingers twitched. It flexed them, stretched its hand, and then curled it into a tight fist. Or, Quint thought, perhaps I should go. Now. Right now. Now,
smart. Quint's very smart.
You could have fucking ended it there, and holy shit. It then drops
great.
into Myco Tyrant, which is another, oh shit.
Well, I like the fact that that's his ending. Yeah. Right? That's cool.
And then they go, that's the ending for him and his potential arc, but then you also then afterwards see Myco Tyrant infected all of these pirates that are travelling back to the Brazen Coalition, and then also Atlacots is also in the ship going back. So you kind of get these dun-dun-dun moments in almost a trifecta. You get 3 of them. Now, between this story coming out and a very specific card being spoiled about 2.5 days later...
Which you showed me that I did not pick up on.
The entire internet was aflame with theory. Now, did anyone land on what the actual answer is? No, because the actual answer is actually really, really quirky. There was a massive thought about this being the Anarchy, because it has similar aspects of being grey, large-limbed, slightly larger. And the Anarchy have had, over the last few years, they've had a couple more cards come out, the Anarchy Javelineer, and then the white one that I can't remember that came out in Aftermath.
Oh, yeah.
And there's even a mention of how they can hear the chainveils sing across the plains, because now the Omen Paths are open.
Not spooky at all.
No, all of this thinking like, shit, if they can also be... And also, we've kind of not really said it, but... that it's widely agreed and understood that this coin empire travelled from another plane to be here. They were multiversal.
Quint's been tracking them
before the Phyrexians were multiversal, before any other race that we know of, and there are quite a few ancient races now, like the Thran, for example, that had ancient technology and ancient magical ability. They were multiversal beings before even planeswalkers existed. And it's not the Anarchy, because on a very specific card, we get a little bit of flavour text.
Do you want me to bring the card up?
Yeah, please, thanks. That was my lead-in.
It's a flip card, or a double-faced, whatever. MDFC. The front face is called Masters. Masters is already very leading. Guide Mural.
Oh, Masters, yeah, with an apostrophe.
Yes. It is the Master's Guide Mural. So
not to be confused with Doctor Who.
3 white-blue for an artifact. When Master's Guide Mural enters the battlefield, create a 4/4 white and blue golem artifact creature token. And it has craft with artifact, which is craft is one of the mechanics for the set. This is very much one of our flavor picks mechanics things. The backside is Master's Manufactory. Master's with an apostrophe. Artifact. Create a 4/4 white and blue golem artifact creature token. Activate only if Master's Manufactory or another artifact enters the battlefield on your turn. Flavor text. The Fomori are a foul and distant memory, but their war machines taught us much about large-scale armorcraft. Anim Pakal, 1000th Moon. So,
no one saw that coming.
The Fomori, as in Ruhan of the Fomori.
Yeah.
Bit of a personal pick for me because he's one of my all-time favourite commanders that I built several decks around. He was one of my first ever build-around commanders. We also have, is it Nomad? Fomori Nomad?
Which is one of the full art cards from Planar Chaos.
Yes.
Oh no, Future Sight, sorry, of where it had the...
Mana symbols.
It has a different framing, and it had full art, so you actually don't get any flavour text from it at all.
But again, another giant. So these are the giant goat people. Goat isn't in their creature type, but giant warrior is. You also have a plane chase card that is from the plane of Ear, which is where IR, which long-time listeners of this podcast will know we've spoken about this a fucking ton because it's one of my favourite things, called Turry Island, which is where the Fomori are from. At least in Plane Chase world, because we know Plane Chase is sometimes a blueprint for what other things are doing. We've never had any other mention of the Fomori. We've never had any other mention of Turry Island or Ear or anything like that.
And none of what we've seen hints at any amount of technological prowess.
So Ruhan and Fomori Nomad are both depicted as berserkers. So I think there's a lot of episodes when we were leading into... Oh God, what set was it that we were leading into that I had this theory for? Where I thought that maybe Saskia's kind of berserker, like, Gaul world.
Oh, right, yeah.
What was that set that I was thinking of?
I can't even remember.
Kaldheim.
Yeah, Kaldheim.
I said one of my ideas of Kaldheim was that instead of just focusing on Norse mythology, they could have had that plane be like each faction of the plane was a different ancient world, maybe around the time of not the Roman Republic, but the Holy Roman Empire, talking about the Romans. When they
because you could have done a little bit of Lycia as well, because Lycia seems to come from like a Roman Empire plane, and it could have all been different aspects of different cultures that have slightly different
in the ancient world that are like roughly around the same sort of 500-year span of being like cool these ancient berserker realms. Anyway, the Fomori are definitely the Celtic, like, Irish berserkers, because, that's just how they were presented with the war paint and everything. But they seemed... And, like, the artwork for Master's Guide Mural and Master's Manufactory are these golems, which are shaped like Fomori goat warriors. In the story, you have these 1,000 moons that we haven't spoken about, but it's basically the old tech have a bunch of, like, automatons that are all these gnomes. They're actually creature type gnome in the set.
Very interesting.
But this one card makes these fucking goat warriors. Like, they're not called that on the token, but that's what they are. The fucking Fomori are space goats.
Yeah, it's so bizarre. It's like when you look at Turi Island and even like what it does. I mean, the plain ear is also really interesting. But I said this to you when because we had obviously had a little bit of a powwow about this after it came out. I just sent Andy the random card going, "What do you notice here?"
You sent it to me in French.
Yeah, it was French, and you were just like, "I don't know, fucking tell me, go on." And I was like, "Look at the flavor text." And obviously, Fomori just translates to Fomori, so you didn't need to know what else was in the flavor
text. I Google translated it afterwards, and before the English version of the card came out, because it was a French spoiler, right?
It's interesting that Turi Island doesn't give off this impression of being something technologically...
It's a craggy island. It's the west coast of Ireland.
And it does make creature spells cost 2 less, but I mean, it is considered, and this is what, like, the only line from this, the history is, a species of barbaric giants called the Fomori are said to be native to its Turi Island. They built and still protect the fortress of Turi Island because it is said to be a manor haven, and is often assaulted by planeswalkers. And it's interesting that for... Again, having spent a day and a half speculating about the Anarchy, because they have a lot more potential to fulfill this role. We know they're an ancient civilization and make really, really powerful objects. Like how you wouldn't think typically that ogres would be able to make a chain veil.
But that's what's interesting about them.
Exactly, it kind of subverts expectation. And then for them to go, well, actually, it's not this one, because we even spoke about maybe potentially that the Anarchy could also be a similarly powerful ancient race, but now we're actually kind of coming in. Now the planeswalkers aren't a big thing anymore. Now we can start looking at what other races and what other long history kind of interplanar travel has happened that we just didn't know about, because planeswalkers bouncing around all the time doing cool things, because Urza was a nightmare, Nicol Bolas was a nightmare, and mostly they were nightmares because they could planeswalk. But you just wouldn't think it. And now it sets up all this speculation of like, well, how long before we find out more about it, and what do they actually do with it?
Yeah.
Because God knows. And it's just such a random... I don't think there's any other cards yet from the set that really give us... And it's interesting that they did drop the name, because they didn't have to. They could have just left it as it was. And they could have left the story... Again, the story kind of leaves it open enough that they didn't decide on any particular race apart from it being grey-skinned, which could even be a new race for all we know.
Yeah.
But the fact that they were interplanar travelling... Now, does this mean that does Ruhan come from... Or do the Fomori now off their plane, are they like... Have they regressed? Have they like lost all of the knowledge and now they're more animalistic and they feel more barbarian?
Ruhan could be part of a different tribe, or like it could be like a Kamigawa situation where Ruhan's from ancient Fomori.
Yeah, exactly. And maybe they do a retcon of it a little bit, but for the fact that they put the Fomori in and having it been a name from before is very, very cool, because they could have just chosen anything. They could have chosen any number of the races that we already knew about. It's like the Raven Man, like the Raven Man actually turning around and turning out to be Leshrac is really interesting, because we know about Leshrac and it kind of confirms that he didn't properly die, and we've still got all of this history and it ties it together more nicely. Now, it could have been an easy win for them to go, oh, it's the Anarchy, and now we're going to tick that box off. It's like, no. They still haven't ticked off the Anarchy box.
Yeah.
But they've drawn a fuck off big new one.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we'll follow Quint. Maybe he'll discover something within it. We fact that one of them is alive.
Yeah.
Are they going to be similar to the what they call him, Prometheus?
whatever they're called.
You even called them. You already said
the space jockeys.
Yeah, space jockeys. Thank you. The space jockeys. We even find one of them alive, and it just basically goes about and tries to carry on doing its normal programming, as it well. Obviously, it's not a machine, but you know what I mean. It's normal purpose, and then ends up dying. Whatever. Blah blah blah. Spoilers. Now, is it going to be a similar thing to that? Or is it going to be that he comes out and sees that it's been thousands upon thousands of years and maybe is now sage and wants to communicate with them? Maybe he reactivates the fucking spaceship and blasts it from the inside of the plane out because... who knows?
Who knows?
Who knows? So on top of all of these within-plane interesting arcs, we've got this civil war going on in the Sun Empire between the aunt and the uncle, like every other random throne-based fucking drama. You've got the... Aklakot's going over to Torrizon probably to make them all souped up and fantastic. We've got Alenza and Beckett Brass and Huatley's ambassador or herald or whatever. Herald was what they were looking for. Okay. They're all kind of doing their own thing. And then on top of that, we've got random interplanar space jockey in the inside of your planet. And we still don't really know exactly why they were why were they trying to trap the sun in the first place? Because we said this earlier, but the people or the peoples... persons that were originally created this metal cage around Chimil were the Fomori. So why? And again, the flavor text doesn't speak of them as being these high and mighty kind of like, oh, they came down from the heavens and they taught us how to... No, they sucked. They sucked and they dominated and they
were masters. They made weapons of war.
Yeah, that's incredible because if they made weapons of war, were they making weapons of war to maybe fight the Mycoid? Did they know about the Mycoid? Again, we have no idea. I could speculate for days about this.
They've really set up
my favourite kind of story.
I think this is such a smart decision because they've gone. I think when this new Phyrexian arc came around, people were like, "Awesome Phyrexians," but also, oh god, we're doing Phyrexians again. And like, great, we had the whole March of Machines. I'm not going to like rag on it or praise it. We've done many episodes talking about the story arc for all of its flaws and positives. This is them really now being like, cool. That was circa 2000 to 2020 Magic the Gathering.
Let's do something new.
This is now the fucking, 30s, 40s and 50s of Magic the Gathering. We're doing giant goats versus mushrooms, and you're going to fucking love it.
and these things might even predate the history. Because that's what I was speaking with Andy about before. It's like, the Thran were this super, super technologically advanced race that lived millennia before any of the Magic the Gathering history that we've lived in. Even Alpha and Beta was technically taking place thousands of years after the Thran. Like, all of the interesting... Like, so the question it brought me up, for example, is that the original plane of Phyrexia, we know that there's this random dragon planeswalker in the centre of it that created it around it. Now, were they also in the same kind of running of being interplanar races that could travel the multiverse? Did the Thran originally have... Because as much as Urza was, yes, the first planeswalker,
yes,
was that an aberration of nature where planeswalkers not supposed to be a thing? And in the latest story, Pawns, Saheeli even says that or Huatley says that, one of the two of them says that it feels like the sparks aren't gone, that they've been taken.
Well, it's interesting.
And where would they have been taken to?
Yeah.
Who by? Why only some of them, and for what purpose?
I reread. That's a really good point. I reread the Nissa Ravine aftermath story, which kind of shows her on News Outfit, and she has a very similar thought and feeling where it's like, okay, she has to use Omen Paths now. They find an Omen Path, they're not quite sure what it is yet, and they don't want to go through it just yet.
Yeah, they're both dead because they only went to Urborg or whatever. They went to the Abyss and they're gone forever.
They're just gone forever.
Ship it right up to the end and then they just go off the
edge. They went to Equilor and they'd lost their fucking minds and now there's just puddles on the floor.
Yeah.
She felt that sort of similar thing of like, she still has this connection but it's not quite gone. Also the Aftermath story with Nahiri was a similar thing. So yes, very interesting. We're running long, so there's two very short last little things I want to point out. First one is we're going to go back to the idea of there are many times where Contorius is spoken to by members of either the Sun Empire or the Oltec, where they're like, what is it that you do, Mr. Loxodon? And he goes, well, I go around, dig things up, and then tell their stories. And people of those cultures go, but they're not your stories to tell. Is that a bit weird? They're not angry, they're not pissed. They just
it kind of makes him think, though.
It makes him think, am I actually the one to facilitate this? And there's after he has those conversations, it's actually very good writing.
Really good writing, yeah.
He has moments where he actively doesn't talk or doesn't go through the door first or do the thing first. He lets
his.
Yeah. And obviously that is a huge comment on the idea that Western cultures who were maybe a bit more technologically advanced, quote unquote, I'm being very sort of lateral here, maybe shouldn't shock horror have pillage the entire world and put it in a museum.
Yeah.
So I don't think I need to labour the point here. We all know in the right thinking 2023 what's going on here.
I think he also does a good job of re-justifying it, because he states it initially and then someone turns around and goes, but that's not really right. And he goes, well, maybe I haven't said it in the right way. Maybe it's not me retelling your story. Maybe it's ensuring that your history never... Like, that the knowledge never dies. It's not like I'm actively taking your thing and taking it from you. I'm sharing your...
Well, they need to justify his character, because otherwise you just kill that character. Because he is an archaeologist, right?
And I think the idea for him is he just wants to know what has happened and for people to understand it, because it might help your future processing.
But it's character growth as societal growth. So it's him being able to say, like, look... If I have the ability to do this thing, then I will do it, but maybe he's now going to grow and be like, I'm not going to do it for me and my own personal interest. I'm going to do it for the fact that I just think this deserves to carry on.
He does it with actual meaning, and probably even checks in and goes, right, how would you like me to be expressing this?
And I think that is a very adequate mirror of our real world, where, again, we're going to talk as Englishmen, we can go, look, we have all these museums full of your shit. That's just a fact now. So how is best to handle the situation? How do we do this?
Don't erase history, do better than history.
Exactly.
Apart from Quint, who has now managed to reawaken the bastard Fomori into playing as alien giants.
He doesn't know. Cool. I think we successfully navigated that shitstorm. The other very last little point, I don't know if you picked up on it. This is very inside baseball in terms of this is a very magic-y magicness. So it's the Legion of the Dusk.
Yes.
Their sigil is a black rose.
Yeah.
Where else in magic is that?
Fiora Marchesa.
Queen Marchesa is the black rose.
Well, is she still considered to be the black rose now that she's queen?
Okay, well that's sort of by the by to my point.
Okay, we'll ignore that then.
I agree, but yes. So there is a line which is from Vito's perspective, and he talks about Bartolome. Bartolome does die, doesn't he?
He does. Yes, he gets his... I think all of them, apart from... Because I think Cordus, or whatever his name is...
neck snapped as well.
Yeah.
There's a lot of neck snapping.
Well, he's the first person to turn... Oh, no, so he turns against Vito when Vito breaks him out
Vito
of prison.
snaps his neck.
And then that's the chance for Amalia and Kel to run off.
So Vito kills Bartolome.
Yeah.
Bartolome is sent by Queen Meralda on a mission to be part of Vito's crew, because the Queen knows that Vito's being a dickwad, so he's being like, right, Bartolome, you go and spy him.
Yeah, no, that's the thing, is at no point is anyone like no one's unaware of what is happening with Vito.
There is a line that is in, I think it's unintentional, but it's just very interesting, where Vito describes Bartolome as a thorn of the Black Rose. The Black Rose being Queen Meralda.
Yeah.
Thorn of the Black Rose is literally the name of a card.
Isn't it a 2/4 Death Touch Monarch guaranteeing card?
Oh, you're dancing around it a little bit. It's a 1/3 Human Assassin Death Touch. When Thorn of the Black Rose enters the battlefield, you become the Monarch.
I knew the toughness was greater than the power.
And I did a search on #Scryfall of Black Rose, and there are 4 cards of Black Rose. They're all Fioran cards. But it's just interesting, isn't it? How, like, these two very prominent factions on completely different planes are, like, the black... It's such a niche thing.
I mean, if you think that, but at the same time, Rose being the nicest flower, black being the darkest colour, like, it's not unreasonable. It's the same thing, there's a lot of sun...
I think I'd balk at the idea that a rose is the nicest flower.
I mean, I think, from our cultural point of view, it's considered the most complex, most
romantic, maybe.
I mean, yeah, I guess you've also got orchids, I suppose, and then maybe lilies.
Petunias are beautiful.
And then it's funny because people are actually also considering, and this is probably actually drifting more into a Flavour Pick episode, but there is a Dusk Rose reliquary in the set where people are like, wait, have they taken her heart and put it in a box? It's like, she's a vampire. She doesn't fucking need a heart. Doesn't matter. She's been...
No, you stab a vampire's heart to kill it.
Well, only with a stake. And also, that's not true for all vampires, I don't think. I don't think you can just go...
Well, you can fucking say anything about that, can't you?
Cool, whatever.
Well, they just fucking... like, oh, these vampires can walk in the sun. Yeah, I get that, but, like,
Yeah, fair.
What fucking makes a vampire a vampire? Yeah. I'm finishing the podcast now because...
Yeah. Okay. Anyway, point being, go read it. It's a really easy breakdown. You can stop at any point. Again, all of the voices are done very well, I think. Again, even individually within all of the different factions, you get slightly different points of view. You don't get a point of view of Breaches, which is good because it would have just been exclamation points every other sentence. It would have been awful.
Unintelligible.
But yeah, I think they did everyone pretty good justice.
Well,
I thought that all of the arcs were fine. I don't think at any point did anyone do anything that was like, oh, that's a bit stupid.
Considering that Alison Lurs was using the last Ixalan set, and wonderfully, it's our favourite arc,
the Flood,
famously
man.
so.
Jesus Christ.
Using it as a vehicle to tell the story of Vraska and Jace as the primary, with the side story being all this other stuff. The fact that we're going back to this plane again, I keep comparing it to Ravnica because I think Ravnica is such a linchpin of magic sort of grokkability.
I think Ravnica's the new Dominaria. For modern Magic players.
Every bit of storytelling for Ravnica, good or bad, this isn't a judgment call on its quality, is day in the life of this guild member. Every time you look at it, even the old novels was we're following this Boros Legionnaire, doing his shit.
Yeah, it's almost
Argus Cast.
another short story in the big analogue of Ravnica.
You never really, fine fucking people Jace, whatever, had their little bits and moments in Ravnica, but most of the time it's not you're following these two characters exploring the plane, it's you're interested in the dynamics of the plane.
And even then, the Planeswalkers, you were seeing their day-to-day life. You weren't seeing them going off and being some hero. You were seeing them this is you having to do an office job. Whereas
in the last time we did Ixalan, it was the hero shit with the race for Orazca being sort of the MacGuffin-y one. This one is all MacGuffin. It's full MacGuffin.
Yeah, you say that, but I also think that because the MacGuffins are so nebulous, it's actually all character journey.
Oh, well, just fucking the other thing.
No, but it's wait, I know what you mean, because the purpose is all the actual process is all this. Oh, it doesn't really matter what you're going to because it's all this fake bull. Either Aklakots is a fake bullshit, or you're trying to get to this power at the other end of the door, which is kind of fake bullshit. We all know from an outside point of view, we all know that is going to the center of, and we know there's a big culture in the middle. Yeah. So we kind of know that it's well, as much as you're doing it for this reason. Let's be honest, you're all going to end up in the centre and it's going to be a big fucking battle.
Yeah.
Now, you don't know that. So seeing the character growth, and again, seeing all the different points of view, and again, seeing how Vito... So there are certain times where you'll be reading, you'll be like, this doesn't sound like... And you'll go back up and you're like, oh yeah, I'm not reading Amalia, I'm reading Vito. Which is why it sounds different. This is why the opinions are different. It's why the focus is different. So I actually think doing a 10-character POV thing is much better to create... to do character journey than it is to do, world building. But the world building wasn't necessary in this because the world building was already there. I think that the character journeys explain that much better. And again, maybe Ixalan is just the plane of POV storytelling because we had it in the first set.
Well, I feel like Ixalan's
going to be next set.
Ixalan's definitely going to be the genesis of the new wave of Magic, and I'm absolutely
how you do factions is that you do from each of their point of views all interspersed with each other. Some of the best fiction I ever read is when you have one chapter and in that chapter you skip 3 or 4 different times between different characters. Because I think that just kind of tells the story better because you get everything in sequence rather than... you don't get everything in sequence. You get everything in... concordance with each other, So everyone's making their own little journeys at the same time and everything's building at the same point and the culmination all happens at the same point and the payoff all happens at the same point. So it kind of feels more justified. Rather than going, hey, chapter 1, and then you get the payoff at the end. You're like, cool, and then you have to build back up in chapter 2. It's like, no, it's all build and then all payoff. So yeah, very good.
Suffice to say, I think this was pretty good.
Yeah, I'm happy. Again, I couldn't stop. I got through 4 chapters before I went, okay, I need to actually go to the toilet now. So, yeah, good reading. Avaricious reading.
You have a Halloween party to get to.
I do. I really don't want to go to it.
Well, now if she listens back to this,
she's got to get to the end of the episode, okay, to hear.
Yeah, she's got to go through.
Also, shit. I've also our closing statement. Our cold open last episode because I didn't know it was a cold open last episode. This is also really bad because I'm doing a fucking call out right at the end, which is actually where you should put things, not at the beginning. Don't like and subscribe at the start. Like and subscribe at the end because it was good content. Scragglepuss is the name of my friend's band. If you have got this far and you were interested from the last cold open, go and look them up. Very, very new. The whole album is a concept album based on our
based on you,
our group's history. But yeah, then one of the songs is literally just my theme song, and it's really good. Why are you so against me being lauded by other people? You selfish bastard.
Do you want to know the actual reason?
Yeah, go on.
Because half the people in this group that you're referring to, a group that doesn't include me, by the way,
were your friends first?
Well, no, not my friends first. Well, they were. Because,
yeah, they were. I wasn't joking.
Because we went to university together, but I was a year older. But half of them are people that I also have historied relationships with.
They haven't written your song, have they?
No. But I wouldn't necessarily expect them to. But the fact that they have about you...
Oh, it's very irksome for you, I know.
Makes me just sort of think like, well, I guess I'll just fucking be alone forever then, will I?
Well, I mean, you've got me.
You and all your fucking songs. Let us know on Twitter at MT Flavouring what your favourite flower is. It's not a rose. No one's favourite flower is a rose. Also, let us know what your big brain theories are about the Fomori. The Fomori part is not the tinfoil hat part. That is on the cards. Yeah. But let us know. I can't believe it. The giant goat warrior that I've spent years playing is now a time-travelling multiversal...
It's so cheeky they dropped it in there. They didn't have to.
Wild. Please talk about
in general,
all of
talk
it.
about that, talk about Acrocots, talk about Mycoid, talk about what, like the Mycoid timeline, like whatever you think might happen off the back of this, because again, they've left everything open, nothing's been finished, nothing's finalised, apart from Italy being dead or Itmil being dead. Whatever. Hotley's cousin, no one cared about him. No one gave a shit.
Valerie Valdez, thank you very much for this story. It was fucking brilliant.
Been great. What else have they done? Have they done anything else?
Their blurb, and I am just going off the blurb, I am sorry. Valerie Valdez is co-editor and award-winning... is the co-editor of the award-winning Escape Pod science fiction podcast, as well as the author of Chilling Effect Trilogy, a space fantasy novel... I've had a couple of beers. Can you fucking tell?
Just a little bit.
Oh my god. As well, the Chilling Effect trilogy, a space fantasy novel where peace is lost. Her short fiction and poetry have appeared in Uncanny Magazine, that's pretty big, Nightmare Magazine, and several anthologies. She lives in an elaborate meme palace in Georgia with her husband,
I want to live in a
children, and
meme
cats. Palace. Yeah, interesting. Anyway.
The science fiction aspect definitely comes in.
Oh, 100%.
I felt like once that Quint bit at the end started coming in talking about the Fomori and the spaceship, like the language almost like changed and became a little bit more indulgent. It's interesting to have a science fiction author do a fantasy story.
I think science fiction and fantasy go hand in hand.
Same, so do I, but it's interesting
far
that
more than people care about.
Yeah, again, I mean, fiction's fiction in my mind, to be fair.
Emails go to at mtflavouring at gmail.com at... Oh god, my personal Twitter is at AndyManface. Nathan's, yours is...
At the Fox in the Moon.
It's not Twitter anymore, it's X. Thanks, Elon Musk. That's all for this time.
Yeah, right, come back next time. We'll see you later.
That's not the sign-off. Thank you so much for listening. This has been Magic the Flavouring.
I'll see you soon.
Where are you going to go as to your party?
I'm not. I don't care.
Just gonna go as Nathan.
Yeah, I don't give a shit, man. I already did Oppenheimer on Sunday. I'm not doing it again. I've lost the hat.
Happy Halloween.
Happy Halloween.